Good morning, friends. This is Robert Band. I'm here today with Kim LaPerry of Valet. And the reason is that she is Valet does WordPress consultation, support, and development. And in my conversations with her, I thought it was relevant to anybody with a website. And so I came up with some questions to ask her, and so that her insight can become your insight. And so I want to get right into it. So Kim, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Why don't you just do like a 1-minute intro of Valet for me and my friends?
Okay, awesome. Well, Valet, as you said, does consultation, support, and development for WordPress websites. Our specialty is taking care of businesses with websites that support their ongoing goals. And we do our best to customize and provide the service that you need to make it all happen so that you can, get to work.
Okay, great. All right, so I need a website. What decisions must I make from the outset that will make my website effective, Kim?
The most important decisions to make from the outset are based on your goals. What are the goals for your website? Do you want it to be content driven? Are you going to be selling something? And who's going to be visiting that website? So outlining what it is that you want to do with it is going to be the most important factor in determining the next steps whenever you decide you want to create one.
Okay, so let's take an example. Let's say I'm an e-commerce company. I'm going to be selling product or services and taking credit card transactions. What sort of considerations do I have to make when choosing a platform? Because there's WordPress and other platforms. And what considerations, whether it's platform or consultant or designer or host or any of that stuff, how does that affect the future outcome of sales on my website?
Your decisions need to be based on scalability and reliability. So even if you don't want to become huge, you want to make sure that you don't create technical headaches for yourself in selecting something that you have to maintain long-term on your own if there's a lot of upkeep and maintenance on your end versus having someone else do it for you or doing an all-in-one solution. And there are also security and technical concerns that you want to make sure folks who are certified and experienced can handle for you, things like payment processors and malware. Those are all very real concerns for folks with websites.
And so is Valet an outsource, if you will, until a company gets of size where they have this capability in-house?
Yes. We fall into a very specific range for most businesses where when you start out, you do a lot of it yourself, and then you realize you have a lot more of the marketing, day-to-day operations, and you really kind of want to get back to business and you need to hand that off. But you don't have the technical expertise or you don't want to hire somebody in-house. You're not big enough to have a full stack dev team on hand or a large technical support team. So those are very large businesses who can usually sustain the type of need for salaries that requires. So we fit in a very good space where we can be a augmentation of your business model to support what your website and technical needs are.
Okay, Kim, so my website has been built. Am I done with development?
No, no. Especially depending on the CMS or the content management system that you choose to build your website on. A lot of the software now that's not done for you, wrapped up in some sort of pre-configured option is open source, which means that the code is constantly changing and then there's constant development happening underneath it. And the tools that go along with that are also under constant development. So your development is never done as far as infrastructure. And in addition to that, your goals change. You're going to wake up one day and want to do something different. So you're not finished. I don't think it's kind of like buying a house. You're never quite done moving in. You're never quite done redecorating. You're never quite done with any of that. So no, you're not done once you get the website.
Okay, great. So if you would, what's the pyramid of needs for a good website management? In other words, what forms the bottom of the bottom foundation of the pyramid, and the successive layers, getting to the top of that pyramid?
Right, right. So all websites, based on our experience, regardless of the content management system that you're using, need to be built from bottom up so that you can sustain the growth that you get over the course of time. And the first thing you need to worry about is security, and then security supports your speed. Speed supports usability, which is accessibility as well as mobile capabilities, and then your traffic, and then your conversions at the top. So that's the order of things that you should worry about them from the bottom up, because they do support one another. And if any of those things is unstable, it can cause the rest to topple off.
And so I assume there's technical software that addresses each of those layers, and technical expertise that's required. Am I right about that?
To a degree, there's a lot of software that will support that model and that level of concern when looking at websites. But a lot of that's actually just understanding best practices for whatever management system that you choose to use.
Okay. What would you say the starting point for deciding on which platform to put your website is?
Going back to the first question about deciding, what's the first thing that you do, we got to just talk about what your goals are. And so based on that, you can investigate what are the available systems and softwares that fit into those categories. Some things are going to be much better for e-commerce. Are you going to have a large store? Do you want to integrate it with a point of sale system? Do you have a sticks and bricks that goes along with it? Or are you just publishing content? Do you want something that's newsworthy? Are you going to integrate with other third-party platforms? So figuring out what you want to do is the first step, and then checking out the capabilities of each of the software that's available on the market to see what fits you the best.
What would you say the pros and cons of various platforms like WordPress, Squarespace, Wix, and such are?
A lot of we call them do it for you or done for you, the DIFYs, like Shopify and Squarespace. The pros to that is that it's simple. You can step in within 10 minutes, you have something up and running. They pre-configure all of the themes for you. The cons is that you're kind of stuck with what they give. So unless they create some sort of an add-on or an extension, you're left with whatever they come with out of the box. Something like WordPress, what we work with, for instance, self-hosted WordPress, because there is a managed WordPress option that kind of does the same do-it-for-you version, but we work with the open source version, which is incredibly extendable, and it can integrate with so many different third-party softwares, a lot of different types of code. So it becomes sort of like kitchen knives, right? You have a lot of different types of knives in your kitchen, and some are better for cooking and some are better for cutting and doing other types of things. So it's just a matter of using the right tool for the job. And the con is, if you use the wrong knife for the wrong job, it could really mess up what you're doing, your recipe or whatever you have going on. So it's just a matter of, again, making sure that whatever you've got is gonna do the job.
But what that underscores is that whereas many people might just say, oh, I need a website, I'm going to go on Wix and find a Wix template and give it to my web developer and let them develop on that. It's better that somebody consults somebody like you up front and say, this is my business, this is where it is today, this is where I think it'll be or hope it'll be in 5 years. I don't want to have to migrate from one platform to another. Let me pick the right one from the beginning. So that's the consultative part of your business?
A portion of that, yes. Yes, we help folks figure out where to start. Even if you're starting small, this is the way you can start to scale later on with your growth. That's a lot. And then again, back to the best practice aspects. For example, you're a finance expert. You're not going to know the best practices outlined in security and all those types of things. And you would much rather have someone that knows that to say, hey, and you take the burden off of you, right? You don't want to have to worry about that. Nobody wants to have to read on those things. So, yeah.
Yeah. What makes a website secure, Kim?
Lots of things. Two things specifically that I'll point out. One is user security. So from an administrative standpoint, you've got to make sure that you can't just give everybody access. Your password can't be password. You've got to be very specific and deliberate about protecting everything on the administrative side. And then on the browser-facing side, you need a security certificate. So some sort of SSL certificate granted to you by either your host or one that you employ separately to add onto your site to make sure that you're serving up encrypted and secure data.
Yeah, can you just explain that SSL certificate once again? So, I mean, most people, they choose a domain, they have their website hosted, they get it developed by a developer. So what does that certificate do? I know that I have in the past gotten a warning that, this website is, in violation of a certificate or whatever that means. What does that actually mean?
So HTTP protocol is what you'll see typically prefixing most URLs on a website. So HTTP / whatever URL is. What you want to see is HTTPS, and that indicates that the site is secure. Okay. So that means that they have employed some layer of protection between the server and you and then the visitor, or themselves and the visitor rather, the website, to ensure that any data that gets processed isn't mined or isn't stolen. All of the payment processors, for example, have additional layers of security to encrypt the data that goes back and forth so that it's not able to be read by robots or any other sort of malicious software that's scanning the internet for your information.
Great. So whenever you get that warning, you should steer clear of that site or call them and say, look, I can't go on your site until I see a new certificate.
Yes, especially if they're going to be asking any sort of personal information, because that's all floating around in the internet ether somewhere, and you don't want to contribute to that unnecessarily if you can avoid it. So yes, contact them and let them know that their security certificate's expired or that their your browser's indicating that it's a problem. And this is something actually Google and the Chrome browser is going to be enforcing a whole lot more over the next year or two. They actually just announced that they're going to start toying with ideas for badges that indicate speed and security for websites. So.
Okay, good. So, an insecure website just increases hacking exposure, theft of data, etc. Any other risks associated with websites that people who have websites need to be cognizant of?
All of your risks, the majority of the risks around a website are going to be user-centered or visitor-centered. So you want to make sure that you have something that's easy to use so you don't lose sales, right? That's a risk, losing sales, losing traffic. If you have a site that's slow loading, if you have a site that's hard to read, if you have one that's not accessible, folks who need to use ancillary devices like screen readers to be able to access content. So there's a lot of pitfalls and a lot of things to worry about for your users. You want to make sure that you have a very empathetic perspective whenever setting up your website to make sure that the folks visiting are getting what they need, including secure encryption, as well as good content that's easy to read and access.
Speaking of that, there's an ADA requirement for websites to be visually or usable by visually impaired people, right? Can you speak to that requirement? I'm not sure if it's only visually impaired people or it's others, but what is the ADA requirement for websites?
So the ADA requirements are based on W3CAG guidelines that were outlined a long time ago when the internet first started. And they've evolved over the years to make sure that the internet stays accessible to everyone. So being that the guidelines are based on these W3CAG rules, the ADA is sort of subject to interpretation on those rules to some degree. Mm-hmm. You'll notice, and what a lot of people in the internet world have been doing is following the ongoing court cases, because those are starting to kind of create the boundaries of what's a reasonable interpretation of these rules and what's a reasonable application of these rules. So while they do require everyone to have an accessible website, what does that mean exactly, to what degree, and for whom? A lot of people are taking a reactionary stance right now where you're just waiting for someone to call them out. And there's some people are being proactive about it as well. But there's still a little bit of gray area on the edges of what are the actual ramifications of not going full out and creating an accessible website, because it's very expensive to have a full audit done.
Yeah, like, okay, if I wanted my website, or if anyone wants their website to be ADA compliant, what does that mean? So does that mean that there has to be a audible reading of the content on the website for a visually impaired individual?
Not specifically, no, but it means that you do have to create the website in such a way that a screen reader can understand it. So the source code of the page is what a screen reader reads. So there needs to be things like, they're called alt tags for your photos. So if the photo's not displayed, it actually has text describing it attached to the photo. So that's what the screen reader would read instead. Different things like underlining links and web accessible colors. So this is where the interpretation portion of WCAG comes in, where it says that you must make everything accessible by doing these things, but how you make them happen is relative. So there are plugins for WordPress, for example, that you can buy that overlay on top of your website, and they fix the most common problems, and they do make your website accessible. But what seems to be the most important thing to ADA when looking at the federal courts cases that have dropped and the verdicts that have been made is that you have at minimum an attempt to make your site accessible and an ongoing demonstration of work to continue creating accessibility. So the expectation of 100% is unrealistic at this point. But working towards that goal of getting there is what's important. That's what they want to see.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is ADA compliance in a business's website management?
Specific ADA compliance, you should always be shooting for 10. Always be shooting for 10. At some point, it's going to be not financially feasible for you to get a super in-depth accessibility review and have someone to do that. It's not the case for everybody. However, it's easy to take manageable bites of it and to do the majority of the work to make sure from the outset, especially. It's hard to kind of go back and fix a lot of things, but you should always be shooting for 10 for accessibility.
All right, Kim, thanks. What are the major deficiencies that you see when it comes to companies' websites out there?
Too many sliders. Everybody wants a slider.
What's a slider like?
Oh, the slideshow on the top of the header of the homepage. Those are so heavy and they take so much time to load. Honestly, the biggest issue right now is mobile compatibility. Just because your site looks good on a mobile phone doesn't necessarily mean it's usable on a mobile phone. I actually, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, scrolling through on my own phone with the ads and realizing that some menus don't work as you would hope that they would, and some things kind of don't lay out correctly. So I think that's probably right now the most popular pitfall is lack of usable mobile websites.
Okay. And now when creating a new site, how does one decide on a web designer and then later a web management company like yours?
Oh, well, the designer is usually a pretty personal choice, especially depending on the size of the company. Branding is a big deal for a lot of larger companies that have a lot of visual assets that they want to maintain consistency throughout all of their products, including a website. If you don't have that concern, though, finding someone, design and front-end development are two different things. So graphic design, creating the assets and the look of something, and actually implementing it are two different things. Finding someone, if you can, to do that first step independent or in consultation with the front-end developer is very wise, because then you can figure out if the functionality fits the form. But finding someone that can really bring whatever vision you have to life with some experience of what technically is the best way to execute some of that is a really good approach.
Okay. So, all right, great. Any other words of advice for people that are either launching websites or already have them? How much of an ordeal is it to scrape a website to WordPress? You know,
It's not incredibly difficult to move to WordPress. We cut our teeth doing migrations in the WordPress space, and so we've done a ton of them, and it's a lot easier now than it used to be. WordPress has become a lot more user-friendly. The admin is increasingly changing with every release of the core software. We just released a new editor in the back end, so creating content and editing content, publishing content's become a lot different. Using a really neat block system that kind of, I think LinkedIn has something similar with the way that they create their posts. So it's constantly evolving, and that's one reason why we really enjoy working with the software, because they are very user focused and working towards making sure that everyone has the best experience while having the most options available for them for extending and scaling the software.
all right, so Kim, I really appreciate your insights, and I hope this sheds light on a critical part of all businesses nowadays, our websites. Now, if you'd like more from Kim, her contact information is in this post. And if you like this video, please share it and like it on this site. This is Robert Band, your business finance expert, helping business owners make their financial problems go away. Remember, one tip could be worth millions, and profits today become fortunes tomorrow. So don't let them fall through the cracks. Talk to you later. Have a good day.